for students that perhaps are still at work, maybe jump in today. So let's talk about what we're attempting to accomplish. So I graded the assignments. Everybody was doing well on project proposals and all the other assignments. The charters looked really good. And then we got to the project plan. So there were enough students that had trouble with it. I felt it was worthwhile to have a conversation, and definitely worthwhile allowing you an opportunity to fix your project plans. Because at the end of the day, it's not really the grade that's important in graduate school. What's important is that you learn the concepts. Yeah, you got to get a B and an A. I get that. But also, you need to understand the concepts, because you're going to see these concepts again in your jobs eventually. You may not be a project manager, but I would venture a guess that someday in your job, you'll come across a project that's being worked on, assuming you go work for a company and don't go into business for yourself. And even if you do go into business for yourself, you may need a project. So let's talk about the project plan. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to just summarize what our project is. It's a process improvement project. And I think everybody now has got that understanding. We're going through the general DMAIC process, the define, the measure, the analyze, the improve, and the control methodology. We're not doing the control piece of our project because we just don't have time, obviously. Plus, you're not going to actually go implement these projects or these ideas somewhere. So we're actually doing the define, the measure, the analyze, and the improve phases of a process, a Lean Six Sigma process improvement project. So all of you pick a process. I've worked with several of you to narrow that process into a process that you can document with the swim lane diagram, and then suggest some improvements, identify some areas where you'll have some waste, whether it be wait times, bottlenecks, whatever the case may be, suggest some improvements, and then document the new process with your improvements built into the process. And you're going to do that with an as-is process diagram and a future state process diagram. You're going to create a SIPOC diagram, which is your supply, input, process, output, and customer diagram, which is related directly to your process. And then you're also going to create a cause and effect diagram. So these are the tools we use to study, analyze, and improve processes. So with that being said, part of this, one of the objectives of this course is to understand project management at a very high level. So you did your charter. Now it's time to understand the project plan. So here's what I'm going to do. I've pulled up an exemplary project plan from, I don't know, a previous semester at some time. I think I've cleansed it, changed the names to protect the innocent and the not so innocent. But let me share my screen and let's talk about how a DMAIC process improvement project plan should look. All right, let's go to a project plan. Now, standard best practices in project management. We're using Project Libre because I can't use Microsoft Project because I can't go tell you to go out and buy Microsoft Project. It's too expensive. So Project Libre is an open source software that doesn't cost you anything. It looks and feels mostly like Microsoft Project. The functions are the same as Microsoft Project. You have this worksheet, you have a Gantt chart, as you've seen already. So if you can use Project Libre, you can go use Microsoft Project and vice versa. A lot of companies are using Project Libre now because they're just getting fed up with paying Microsoft's every 3 or 4 years upgrade fees. I know you may remember, I worked for HCA for a long time. HCA has, I don't know, at the corporate office, they've got 3,500 employees in Nashville running around. Many of them have Microsoft Project on their computer. So when HCA has to upgrade Microsoft Project, and if you're looking at a $300 per seat license upgrade, $300 times 3,000 is a big number, right? And Microsoft changes every, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. So that's starting to get a little cumbersome for some companies, probably not HCA, but certainly for smaller companies. So let's go beyond the tool because you need to understand the tool definitely. But let's talk about the structure of the plan. Best practice on project plans. Your first task should be a high-level project summary task. And all your work should be indented underneath that task. What that indentation does is it creates subtasks. So let's do this. Let's just go through here. Let's play with this plan a little bit. Let's take these and let's outdent them. And then let's just take this one and outdent also. So I got some plans that look like this, which is fine. You've got the right concept of tasks, but the problem is there's no structure to this plan. If you look at your Gantt chart, you've got all this work going on at the same time. You can't do that unless you have a boatload of resources, which, as you can see, this project plan only has 2 resources, an assistant director and a student employee. Now, in this project, you're free to make up your resources. Use yourself. You're doing the work to document the as-is state, so put yourself on that task. I had some students put me on every task. I didn't count off for that, but that doesn't make any sense. I'm not doing any work on your project. So pick resources. Make up names if you want. I don't care. That's fine. But there's got to be a resource defined to every single detailed task. Now let's talk about what a detailed task is versus summary task. So if I take my define phase, this defined task, I should say, and if I go up to the ribbon under the task tab, about midway through, you'll see an indent and an outdent option. When I indent a task, that makes that task a subtask of the task above it. You see, when I did that to this defined task, the print marketing distribution time task became bold, and we now have an expand and collapse button next to it. That means it's a summary task. I can collapse it, I can expand it. The task is now represented with a black line and 2 triangles on either end. Once you have a summary task, you no longer adjust start and finish dates and durations. They're all controlled via the detail tasks, and I'm going to show you that. So I had indicated in the assignment that you need to have a define phase, a measure phase, an analyze phase, and an improve phase. So this particular plan has a define. Could say define phase, but it's define. I understand it. And then I said under each one of those phases, you must have a minimum of 4 tasks. You should be able to come up with 4 tasks in your reading of the content of what happens in the DMAIC process. So this student or this particular plan had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tasks. That's fine. I also told you you had to have 4 specific tasks in your project plan. You must have a task that says document the as-is state, create the as-is process diagram. I don't care what you name it. But you got to create the as-is documentation. You have to develop a SciPy. You have to develop a future state process map. And you had to have, and I don't see it in here, so this plan probably got marked up, but you had to have the cause and effect diagram or some other tool. So there were 4 tasks I indicated you had to have in your project plan. Now let's think about the DMAIC process. If I'm going to document the current process and develop the SciPy on the current process, that's not something I'm going to do at the end of the project, right? So a process improvement project is you study the current process, you define it, then you measure the current process. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take all your data that you've measured and you analyze it, and you're going to start looking for areas where you can improve the process. And then in the prove stage, or the improve phase, is where you're going to suggest your improvements and implement your improvements. So it's just kind of common sense, the flow of the project. So let's go back to the tasks that we have. This particular plan has these tasks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, are part of the define phase. Well, we want those indented underneath the define phase summary task. So I'm going to indent them twice. And now you see I've got a nicely defined define phase. This indicates that these 7 tasks belong to the summary task called define. If I close the define, I don't see those 7 tasks anymore. I collapse the plan to a higher level. So now let's go and restructure this plan the way it is supposed to be. Let's get all our detailed tasks where they belong. Remember, our detailed tasks must be underneath the summary tasks. Now, this measure task is not where it belongs. It's all the way out to the left. And if you remember a few minutes ago, I said everything should be indented under your summary task. So that means this measure phase needs to go in 1. This analyze phase needs to go in 1. This improve phase needs to go in 1. you should have a nicely lined up project plan. And here's how you can test yourself. Close all your phases, and you should only see your summary task, your 4-phase summary tasks, and your project complete milestone. That's all you should see when you collapse your tasks. If you don't see one of these, like for instance, some student accidentally had it indented too much, you notice the improved phase disappeared. Well, that's wrong. You've indented it too much. The improved phase is now a subtask of the analyze phase, and that makes no logical sense whatsoever. So the test is, if you can close all of your summary tasks, with the exception of your high-level task, you should see your 4 phases. If you close your high-level summary task, you should only see just the high-level task or the high-level task and the project complete task. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Do I have any questions up to this point? Wonderful. All right, let's open this back up. Let's just get the defined phase open. So you put in your tasks, you have to have 4 tasks. In this case, this plan has a select a process, which you did, propose the process, which you did, process approval, which you obtained, create a project charter, which you did that last week or 2 weeks ago, and then the required task of documenting the as-is state, develop the SIPOC. I also indicated in the assignment that every phase must have a milestone at the end of it. A milestone task in project management is a task that has no 0 days duration and no resources assigned to it. A milestone task is nothing more than an indicator that a body of work is complete. Right? That's what a milestone task is. So that we know that when this task is marked complete, we know that the defined phase is complete. We put milestone tasks at the end of groupings of work. We also put a milestone task at the end of the project, which basically designates that the project is complete. So you must have a milestone task at the end of each one of these phases. It's fair enough to just call it define phase complete, measure phase complete. That's fine, whatever you want to call it. But the key, what defines a milestone task in project management software is the 0 day duration. That is true in Project Libre, and that's also true in Microsoft Project. What happens when you look at your Gantt chart, when you define, as soon as you put 0 day duration, your task on the Gantt chart becomes a black diamond. A black diamond in Project Libre or Microsoft Project designates a milestone task. That means there's no work associated with this task, nor should there be any resources assigned with it. Again, it's a placeholder that just says this body of work, when it's marked complete, everything above it in this grouping is complete. We have a big milestone, a checkpoint, if you will. The define phase is complete. Great, celebrate. Let's move on to the measure phase now. So a DMAIC process improvement project is sequential from the perspective of phases. You can't go do the measure phase if you haven't defined your process, right? It's general problem solving methodology. You have to define the problem, then measure the problem, analyze your measurements, and then make the improvement suggestions. So these cannot all occur at the same time. I had a couple plans that had the improve phase actually first. You can't improve something if you haven't even defined the problem. So just think of it logically as a sequential process. All right, durations. I don't care, make up durations, be creative. At the end of the day, you have to finish at a minimum your analyze phase by the end of the semester, because you're going to be handing in these documents. You also have to finish your, in this case, the way this one is set up, this develop future state process map has to be finished by the end of the semester because you're handing it in to me. So in all reality, all of your steps really need to be completed by the end of April, right? That's the end of our semester. I think it's April 28th, I'm not sure. So if you have your project plan going on until September, that's a problem. Right now, if we had a control phase, that would probably go on through September. Typically, Six Sigma process improvement projects are generally 3 to 6 month projects. But again, we're not doing the whole project because you're not doing this out in the real practitioner world and actually implementing your ideas. And then typically once you implement, you remeasure to ensure that you achieve the value that you propose. That's called the control phase. All right, so again, I should be able to see when I close my phase groupings, I should see the 4 phases. When I open them, I should see a defined phase complete. I should see a minimum of 4 tasks in each phase. And I should also see 4 specific tasks: the document as is state, the document future state, which was down here somewhere. I lost it. There it is. I should also see create a SIPOC document or develop a SIPOC. I should also see develop a cause and effect diagram. Now, I've had students ask, well, where do I place those? Well, logically, let's think about that. When I'm documenting the current state, where would those documents be in this process? Somebody give me an answer. Just shout it right out if you know.
Define.
Define, right? I'm defining the problem. If I'm documenting the as-is state, that is part of documenting the current problem, the current process. A SIPOC is a current state documentation of your suppliers, your inputs, your process, your outputs, and your customers. Technically, the cause and effect diagram could go in a couple places. It could go in the define, it could go in the measure, it could go in the analyze. Wherever you put it is just fine. Your document future state has got to be either in your analyze or your improve stage, because you can't document the future state until you come up with your improvement ideas, right? I had a couple students put document future state up here in the define. And my response was, well, that doesn't, how does that even make logical sense? How can you possibly define the future or document the future state if you're going to decide the future state down here, right? You got to decide it before you can document it. So when you think of it from this perspective, I'm hoping that it makes a lot more sense to you. And the beauty is, since we don't have these Zoom sessions, because this is a totally online class, we don't get the benefit of explaining these things to you. And I'll be honest with you, books and readings just don't do justice to some of this stuff. All right, questions up to this point? We should understand our structure. We should understand what the minimum requirements are for the individual phases. And then we should understand what it should look like. Wonderful. Okay. So let's talk about a couple more things. Predecessor relationships. Predecessor relationships, Microsoft calls them prerequisite relationships. Used to, I don't know, I haven't used Microsoft Project in a while. But these essentially, these relationships allow you to structure your project plan. For instance, if I look at task number 4, which says propose process, if I make task number 3 a predecessor, and that's what this project plan does, that basically means task number 4 can't start until task number 3 has ended. Right? That's what predecessor means. It's a task finish before task starts relationship. It's the most basic relationship in project management. There's several others, but we don't need the complicated ones for the purpose of this class. So what if I took these out? So put your project in, you probably don't have any predecessors. Several students handed in projects without predecessor relationships. Well, when I look at this, what I see is 1, 2, 3, 4 tasks happening at the same time. Now, in project management, you cannot have 4 tasks happening at the same time unless you've got different resources working on those tasks. In this case, the assistant director is on all 4 of these tasks. The assistant director cannot do 4 tasks at one time. Now, yes, we can get fancy, we can get creative, we can allocate an assistant director only 25% to each task. We're not doing that in this class. That's advanced. right? This is not our graduate project management class. If you're interested in that, take our graduate project management class with Dr. Bullington. This is just an introductory. So we're going to have all resources assigned at 100%, which means they cannot work on multiple tasks on any given day. So I could say, well, all right, I'll do it the hard way. I'm going to go ahead and individually say this task needs to start on 10/23. All right, well, now it moved out. Wonderful. This task, I'm going to move it out and say I'm going to start it on 10/26. All right, so now I'm moving my tasks out. That's beautiful. I like it. But that's cumbersome, right? Now you got to actually pick the dates and look at the dates. It's kind of cumbersome. Let's put them back the way they were. The best and easiest way to do that is just simply set a predecessor relationship. All right, well, I'm not going to propose the process until after I select the process. That makes some logical sense. I can't propose the process before I select one. So let's go and link these two together. Once I link the two tasks together in your Gantt chart, you'll see an arrow come up that designates from task 3 to task 4. That means task 4 is dependent on task number 3. All right, well, I can't document my as-is state until after I propose my process, so that makes a lot of sense. Let's hook these two together. Let me move the gallery up here. And then let's go ahead and hook my SciPoc together and make this sequential. Now you see that all my tasks automatically move. And they're sequential tasks. You can't have parallel tasks unless resources can do the work at the same time. So that's what predecessor relationships do. If we want to connect a task to two tasks, we can put a comma or a semicolon between them. This task number 7 says that the defined phase cannot be complete until tasks 5 and 6 are done. So when I document my as-is state and I develop my SciPoc, only then, when those tasks are done, can I possibly mark my project, this milestone complete. And you'll see the milestone now is at the end of the work, which is where it belongs. If I don't hook this to anything, my milestone is way over here at the beginning of this chunk of work, which makes no sense because a milestone designates that the work is complete. You can't have a milestone at the beginning of the body of work. That's illogical. This milestone must be at the end of your work. All right, so you should have a well-structured project plan in the Gantt chart that shows your tasks and the milestone at the end of each bucket of work. Now, if you happen to say, well, in this case, student employee downtime, 4 days, it's going to start here. It's not linked to anything. You know, I'm not going to argue with you on your project. That's fine. If you believe that's true, it works for me. However, if I see no predecessor relationships, then I say you didn't do the project right. I'm looking for logical predecessor relationships here. One thing you should not do, you should not have predecessors set on summary tasks. You should always have them set on detailed tasks. So this project plan has a couple issues by having predecessor relationships on summary tasks. Put your predecessor relationships on detail tasks and milestones only. Right? Likewise, you never ever assign resources to a summary task. Resources don't work on a summary task. You assign resources to tasks where they have to do something. If I tell one of you to go develop a SciPoc, you know what to do. You go develop a SciPoc. If I tell you to go propose a process, you know what to do. If I tell you to go work on current maintenance delays, you know what to do. If I tell you to go work on define, what does that mean to you? It has no meaning. That's not a task. That's a summary task. All right, so we only assign resources at the detail level, the detail task level. So don't put resources on your summary tasks and don't put resources on milestones. There's no work associated with milestones. There's no reason to put a resource there. Remember, they're placeholders to designate the end of a body of work. So by now you should have a good structured plan, indented correctly. You've got predecessor relationships set up, which in turn will set your dates. If you use predecessors, you don't even have to mess around with the dates. You've gotten creative, you've come up with durations such that you can get your work done by the end of the semester. That's fine. Now we need to assign some resources. There's quite a few students who assign no resources. In order to assign resources in Project Libre or Microsoft Project for that matter, you have to have some resources entered. So you go to the tab, the resource tab at the top. You go to the resource icon on the far left of the ribbon. And then you have a new blank spreadsheet where you just enter the names of your resources. You don't need to worry about this stuff. You don't have to put a wage rate in. You can, you don't have to. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. You need to put resources in. You can use your name, your friend's name, make up a name. I don't care. You got to put the name here first. And then if you go back to your task tab, on the ribbon that opens, go back to your Gantt chart icon. It'll take you back to your project spreadsheet and Gantt chart. Now you can assign resources. There's two ways you can do it. Let's take this resource file. If you're going to do a direct type, you have to type the resource name exactly the way you entered it. So if I said assistant director without a space, Project Libre will come back and say, basically, never heard of that resource, try something else. The best way to do this is to just double click on your task, go to the resource tab in the pop-up box, go to the little blue icon that shows the document with two people, and now pick the resource you want to assign to that task and click on it. Hit assign, and you'll notice that that resource, the line turns green. You've assigned that resource to that task. And you can assign 2 resources to that task if you like, 3 resources to that task if you like. Close your dialog box, say close on your pop-up, and you'll notice now all 3 resources have been assigned to that task. Or you could type in the 3 names and separate them with either semicolons or commas, as long as you type the names correctly. So the resource names will show up in that column, and you also notice the resource names will show up on the Gantt chart. Any questions on assigning resources? Wonderful. Now, in Project Libre and Microsoft Project, anytime a task is represented in red, that means that the task is on the critical path. Why is that important? What that tells you is any task in red on this project, if it gets delayed at all, your entire project will be delayed. Your end date will be pushed. If this task over here, which is called student employee downtime, if it gets delayed at all, it's not going to push my end date at all. Okay? That task is not on the critical path. So when I mark my tasks complete, which you're going to do next week, and I'm going to talk about that very quickly tonight, if this task gets delayed, it doesn't impact your final delivery date. But if any one of these red tasks gets delayed, it will automatically push your end date. Now, if this blue task gets delayed long enough, it's going to become on the critical path and it will impact you. Tasks could go in and out of the critical path status based on where they are and how long they're being delayed. Not a terribly important concept for this particular assignment, but good to know. Now, some students have gotten themselves into this mess over here. When you have a calendar icon in the first column, somehow, whatever you did, you set a hard constraint on this task. It happened when I took predecessor relationships off and I typed in dates. Somehow I set a hard constraint. I don't mark off for that. I'm not worried about it. I want to see a good project plan, but I have had the question, how do you get rid of it? You can double click on the task, go to your advanced tab. It's being controlled by this box that says Constraint Type. somehow you've got a hard constraint that says start no earlier than 10/22. That forces this icon here that says no matter what happens in this plan, no matter what happens with this predecessor relationship, this task is not going to start before 10/22. If you just turn that or click on that drop down box and turn it back to as soon as possible, you'll notice the calendar icon goes away. For the purpose of our project and what we're doing in this class, I'm not too worried about it. In my undergraduate project management class, that's a problem because once you start executing your project, it gets all messed up. All right, so now we've covered the structure of your plan. We've covered the structure of the 4 phases that are required. We talked about the 4 tasks that are required. We talked about you need a minimum of 4 tasks in every phase. We talked about you have to have a milestone at the end of each phase, as well as a project summary task and a project closing milestone. Somehow I got there, right there. We talked about predecessor relationships. We talked about durations. We talked about assigning resources. And you'll notice one of the bugs with Project Libra that is still not fixed, that when you scroll back and forth, your headers don't go with them for some reason. I reported that about 10 times and nobody seems to ever fix it. All right. That'll get you through to hand in this assignment and get a good grade if you do all those things. Questions? Okay. Now, for the sake of the recording and for your next assignment where do you turn in the project plan with completion dates? Let me go quick check here. Let's go to our friend Zoom. I don't remember anymore. Changed this a little bit this semester. Okay, so we have 3 parts to your lean process improvement project. Part 1. Okay, let's do this. Let's go to the student view because it's going to be a lot easier. Otherwise, you're going to be here a while. Let's go to our Dropbox. So we got 3 Dropboxes. Here we go. Let's look at the directions on part number 1. This is what you're working on as your final project for the semester, end of the semester. It's taking a very long time. Okay, so you're going to create your process swim lane diagram. I have instructions on that. You're going to create a process narration of what your process is. You're going to tell me what you would use to measure your process, the success of your process. If I'm doing a process improvement project on the Starbucks over at the library on campus, which is one of the most inefficient places on planet Earth, how could I measure that process? I could measure that process by the time it takes for a customer to make an order or to communicate their order to the time they get their drink, right? That's one measurement. Total process time. Think of measurements of how you would measure the success of your project. You need 2 at a minimum. Feel free to use the internet. Use whatever you want. I've got more information in here about swim lane diagrams, yada, yada, how to do it. Here's the symbols you should use. I even gave you an example of what it should somewhat look like. Keep in mind that any diagram must have a clear, concise, and descriptive title, otherwise you get points marked off. This example is not a good example. There's no title. Somebody look at this. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's for. You should have a title. There's a better example with the process name. All right, so I gave you plenty of examples on how to do it. Let's go ahead and just go through all of these. And then you will have this recording to refer back to as you start working on these 3 assignments. And of course, you're always free to call me and I can do one-on-one Zoom session, whatever you need. All right, your second assignment, part 2, you're going to do your SIPOC, your cause effect, and your lean waste analysis. In this case, you're going to create a SIPOC document. Here's an example. This is on your process. You should have your process steps in the middle. In this case, enter phone and fax orders, respond to technical support calls, respond to the order status inquiries. Think about what the inputs are for each one of these steps and who supplies them. So in a SIPOC document, suppliers are not all external suppliers. If we think about what goes into this process, yes, my consumers are suppliers of information. They provide the order, right? My retail customers are part of the process, but my system is also a supplier. My customer relations management system is a supplier. It supplies information to me to do these steps. My field sales team, my technical product database supplies information into my process, as does the SAP ERP system. So don't think of suppliers just as customers. You want any entity that supplies something into your process, whether it be information or physical entities of some type. So let's think about that Starbucks. The customer is a supplier. They give the order to the order taker, the cash register person. The next step in my process, the cash register person puts that order into the system, right? So now the cash register person is a supplier of information into the system. The system now has the order for the barista. The supplier now is the system, which supplies the order to the barista. The barista is going to make the drink. In this case, Starbucks coffee, wherever they got it from, is a supplier because he's going to use coffee grounds. He's going to use milk, so we have a supplier for the milk. Now, you don't have to get carried away. I don't want to see a 7-page SIPOC document. Don't waste your time. I want to see that you understand the concepts. List the high-level suppliers, list the high-level inputs that go into your process, get your process steps in here, and then think about, now let's look at the right half, your outputs. So when the customer makes the order to the cash register person, the output is the order that's going to go to the barista. So the order, as you can see, orders entered. That would be an output of one step of your process. The output from the barista is going to be the drink, right? It's going to go to the customer. The output from the cash register operator is going to be a receipt. It's going to go to, let's assume that the customer actually is going to take the receipt. And then who receives these outputs? So again, the barista is going to receive the order. So the barista is technically a customer of that step of the process. We're breaking the process down into the individual steps and thinking about what goes into that step, what comes out of that step, who supplies the input for that step, and who gets the output of that step. That, in a nutshell, is what a SIPOC document is, and you should learn about that when you view the videos. Cause and effect diagram, that's the fishbone diagram. There's plenty of information in D2L about cause and effect diagrams. Analyze your process and look for lean wastes. There's content in D2L about the 8 types of lean waste. Right? There's transportation, there's overproduction, there's wait time. And that's,
I have a question about that.
Yes, please, please, please.
For the lean waste, do we have to use all 8?
No. No,
okay, yeah, because some don't apply to my project, and I think I actually messed up on that part, because we are supposed to use that specific verbiage that you have in D2L, correct?
What do you mean by
like for transportation, and then give like a little synopsis of what it means for our project? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. So many times you can find most of the waste anywhere. So I had somebody do one a couple semesters ago and said, well, there's no transportation in a hospital. I said, what are you talking about? You put a patient on a gurney all the time. That's transportation, right? And we went through and had a great example. They happened to be doing something in women's services. I said, okay, well, it sounds like your hospital has prepartum department, a labor and delivery, and a postpartum. So you're basically taking the mother-to-be from prepartum, you're putting her out of gurney, you're moving her to the labor and delivery department. She's delivering her baby, and then you are moving the mother to postpartum, and you're moving the baby to the nursery. That's transportation. Wouldn't it be interesting if you just brought the mother in to a room? You might have to reconfigure your hospital. This wasn't their project necessarily, but I say this because we did this in a lot of HCA hospitals. We turn the room into a place where the mother-to-be comes. She stays there for her prepartum. She gives birth right there, and she stays there postpartum. So we don't move the patient, right? We eliminated the transportation waste. We also reduced a great deal of risk. Every time you put a patient on a gurney, you've opened up risk to the organization because the patient can fall off the gurney. She can get hurt getting on the gurney. She can be hurt moving her off the gurney. So not only did we eliminate waste from a transportation perspective, we also eliminated risk, which is a wonderful thing. So think of what you can. You certainly don't have to have an example of all 8 types of waste. Wow, that was a long-winded answer. Did that help?
Yes, thank you. That actually made me kind of reconsider some of mine that I was already using anyways.
Okay, good. Yeah, don't force them. Come up with good examples, definitely. All right. And that's all there is to part 2. You know, I used to have students put this into a very elaborate project, multi-page project. And I thought, well, you're graduate students. You should know how to do that already. I eliminated overproduction in my class. Students were putting them in binders and all kinds of stuff. And I said, look, that's not what this class is about. This class is conceptual. I need to understand that you know what this stuff is. I don't need to know that you can put a binder together. That's undergraduate work. That's all my philosophy, by the way. That's my caveat. That does not necessarily represent the opinion of Middle Tennessee State University nor the Jones College of Business or other professors. All right, part number 3, you are going to redo your swim lane diagram, but you're going to redo it to include the improvements that you suggest. You have to come up with at least one improvement, otherwise this project's dead. Now, full disclosure, that happens sometimes, right? In real life, we work on projects, we analyze, and we come back and say, wow, there's nothing we can do. That rarely happens, however, because today's business world is rampant with waste all over the place. But for your project, you need to come up with some form of improvement. If you are absolutely stuck and can come up with nothing, let's get on the phone. I'm sure I can help you come up with something. All right, I've had the question. Swim lane diagrams can be vertical or horizontal. I don't care. Be consistent. If you did your current state vertical, then do your future state vertical. Don't switch in the middle. That tends to tick people off in the real world. All right, some quick pointers. I've even included them here. You should never have a symbol unconnected to something. That's an indication you've done something wrong. Okay, process steps have to be connected to something. If you have something sitting way out here all by itself, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that you documented that correctly. Maybe you can, but maybe that's a giant glaring form of waste. But I have yet to find a good example of why something's just completely disconnected. All decisions must be diamonds. In your process, in this case, let me just blow that up a little bit. We've got contracts agent reviews the order. That's a great indicator that the next step is going to be a decision, because something's going to have to happen with that order. In this case, the order has standard terms. Yes, I go here. No, I go here. This is flow charting. That decision must be in a diamond. Every diamond must have at least a minimum of 2 paths coming out. Otherwise, it's not a decision. Those paths must be labeled. If it's yes or no, if this were a type of drink, coffee or tea, You must label your paths out so that the reader understands what the decisions are, so they know where they're going. So if it's a no, we come down here, and I can see that the contracts department, if they're not standard terms, the agent requests approval. I'm going to hit another diamond. Change is acceptable. No, I'm going to go down here. Yes, I'm going to go back up here and go back to this step that I would have gone to had the terms been right in the first place. So your process must start somewhere and it must end at least one place. It could, in this case, end in different places, and that's fine. Steps are typically rectangles. Start and stop steps are typically ovals or circles. That's all I'm asking you to do. There's a very elaborate business process notation standard that I believe I've included in D2L. You don't have to use it. There's about 100 different symbols. We're not going to get that detailed here. You just need to flowchart your process using, I didn't include it in this diagram. It's in the first part 1, tells you which symbols you should use: the diamond, the rectangle, the circle. And well, the oval, the circle is also a connector if you have to go to 2 pages. Some of these go to 2 pages where you use the connector. All right, you'll have a new narration of your process, or I should say a narration of your new process. What changed in your process? Talk about your process measurements, how you believe they'll be improved by the improvement that you have proposed. And that's all there is to those. That's all there is to it. And that is part 3, which represents the end of your project. You can hand in part 1 to the part 1 Dropbox, part 2 to the part 2 Dropbox, part 3 to the part 3 Dropbox. You do not need to put them all together in some kind of elaborate document. Questions? You should have read chapters 1 and 2 on process modeling. That'll help you. We've got some lean waste identification to give you the 8 types of waste. Here's a web page on how to identify waste in a process. Dr. Welburn's done 2 great videos on introduction to lean and what lean means. He also has done a video on how to do process maps. Here's another separate video on process mapping, how to create a SIPOC. Tim Wood, those are the 8 wastes. So it's a video on identifying the 8 wastes. Dr. Welburn has done a lot of these videos for us. Cause and effect diagrams. Cycle time is not necessarily required. You don't have to calculate cycle time, bottleneck, or TAC in this particular project. I've left the videos out there anyway so that you can understand them. Let's see, what else can I tell you? You've got your assignments, and then you've got your final exam. I think this is already available. Let's look at your final exam very quickly. Got 7 minutes left, and this will be an all-encompassing video for the remainder of the semester. My final exams are not multiple choice, multiple guess, true, false. I don't care if you can memorize. What I do care about, however, is that you have the ability to describe and discuss 3 concepts that you have learned in this course. Define the concept and discuss how you demonstrated or learned the concept in course activities. For instance, what did you learn? What new skills did you learn as a result of working with the concepts? What did you find exciting, surprising, frustrating? Don't forget the part of telling me how you demonstrated or learned. That's all there is to question number 1, 3 concepts. For question number 2, take each of the concepts that you have discussed in question number 1. Relate the concept to a situation outside of this class. It can either be in your undergraduate work, it can be in your existing graduate work, it can be in your work, your job life, it can be in your personal life. Has to be outside this class, okay? For each concept, tell me what the concept is very shortly. If you already told me what the concept is up here, you can just tell me the name of the concept. You don't have to redefine the concept. I don't want to read that a second time. How does the concept relate to the situation outside of this class? how can you apply the concept learned? Those two answers are pretty close to nearing the same thing. How can you apply the concept? And then question number 3, discuss any aspects of the course you enjoyed or would like to see improved to provide a better learning experience. This question is very simple. If you provide something that's constructive as an answer, you get the 15 points. There's no grading on this one. Okay? I'm looking for feedback on this course. We have a lot of students take this course every semester. I teach most of the sessions. I think Dr. Morgan just started teaching a session of this. I think I have 3 sessions of this in the fall. I need to understand, especially for the online classes, how can I make this an engaging course, one that you get something out of? So if you give me all negative aspects in this question number 3 and say, well, I didn't like this, this, and this about this course, that's fine. That's what I'm looking for. If you did like something, tell me that too, because that's good to know. So I'll keep that in the course. If you just give me one sentence that said this course sucked, you're probably not going to get the 15 points. I have a hard time giving you that. It needs to be constructive, okay? Give me something you don't like about the course if there's truly something you did not like about the course. So question number 3 is a gimme. You just got to write something. Question number 1 and 2, I believe, are very doable. Wow, that was a full-on 55-minute blitz of information. Who has a question? Wow.
Hi, good evening. I have a quick question. I noticed in the email that you had sent out that you may consider resubmissions for the Project Libra assignment. So I just wanted to see what considerations you may be giving us, and if there's certain, grade levels or something we needed to meet to have that resubmitted.
Well, I hope I said I will reconsider and not may. If I said may, that was a typo, because that kind of makes me seem kind of, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't.
I think it was will, but yeah.
Okay, good, good. I'm glad to hear that. I will accept any resubmission on this project or on the project plan and grade it as if it was your first submission.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Improve your grade. Anybody can improve their grade. I'm glad you asked that question. The reason being, again, grades are not important to me. I know grades, we have to grade you at the university level, and you have to get an A and B to get out of graduate school. But at the end of the day, grades are somewhat subjective to a certain degree. I want to know that you understand these concepts when you get out of this class. I want to know that you can create a process flow of a diagram, a process with a process flow. I want to know that you understand what a project plan is and what it looks like. I want you to be able to understand what a charter is and what it looks like. What's a cause and effect diagram? What's a SIPOC? What are the lean wastes that you can identify? So I'm looking for you to learn the concepts. So I'm happy to say, especially people did really poorly on the project plan. There's no reason why you should end up getting a C or a D in this class because you didn't understand the project plan. Now, granted, you should have asked me before you turned it in. However, there's no reason to get a C or D in this class just because you didn't understand the project plan on the first cut. So I'm happy to have you resubmit and reconsider.
Great. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
You're most welcome. If you need to leave, feel free. If you have any questions, feel free. I can still answer questions. Again, this was recorded. I'll probably won't have it posted until tomorrow. It might get out there sometime tonight. It's all automatic, so I don't know. But I'll certainly go out there tomorrow and clean it up so that you can refer back to it when you're actually working on the homework. I can't stress enough, if you have questions, contact me. Don't guess. Okay?
Dr. Tarpey, when is the latest we could turn this project in?
A resubmission?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't even think about that, Javisha. How about, well, I don't know. It'll be next week sometime. How about, see, we have this. How about a week from tonight?
Okay. Sounds great.
I gotta put a cutoff there somewhere because I don't want to be grading these on the last day of the semester.
Okay.
I'll send an email out and we'll make it a week from tonight.
Okay. I appreciate it.
You bet. I probably should take a note of that or I'll forget. Who else has a question? All right, fantastic. Well, it was wonderful talking with you and meeting you in a better format than just online. And again, I'm here if you need me. Just email me and we'll set up time that's convenient for you on your work schedule, whatever the case may be, okay?
Okay.
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Take care.
So much. Y'all have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Dr. Tarpey, do you have a second to discuss with me when everyone leaves?
Certainly.
Okay.
Certainly. Let me, while everybody's leaving, let me go ahead and take this note here about the deadline. Let's see. So a week from tonight is the 15th. So 4/22. That's for NBAM 6875. Okay. One student left, and they have walked away from the computer though. Are you comfortable talking, or do you want to set up a new Zoom?
If you don't mind, can we set up a new Zoom?
Not at all. Okay, let me end this one. Are you going to set up a link, or do I need to?
It doesn't matter.
Why don't you set one up while I'm ending this one?
Okay.
Okay, email me and I will get on it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.